Hello and welcome, fellow bookworms and film fans. Welcome to this week's episode of The Contented Narrative. Now, don't forget to click subscribe as well so you're alerted whenever a new video comes out. So this week we'll be looking at Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Now, this book was actually published in 2000 and then released on film in 2005. Obviously, it was written by J.K. Rowling. Who else would do Harry Potter? So I will be looking at I'll be looking at three things. I'll be looking at how good is the book, how good is the film, and how good is the plot take from the book to the film. So first things first. Now, there's a lot of debate when it starts getting to these later films. Everyone sort of loves the first three films. I mean, the first two, even with the bad acting and everything, they kind of, they love it. And the majority of people's favourite Harry Potter films is actually Prisoner of Azkaban. Then it starts getting from like Goblet of Fire onwards, and they start feeling a bit let down by the films. However, I really like them. I like the films and I like the books, and I like them just equally as good as each other. And what I tend to, and I know it's hard, and anybody that knows me knows that I do struggle to sort of like take them as their own different narrative. But as long as it's got enough of the book and it's still got the magic and everything to it in the Harry Potters, I can kind of let it slide a little bit, not a lot, but like a little bit. But the film itself, I really enjoyed. It's a highly enjoyable film. I mean, come on, David Tennant as the bad guy. I mean, I know you've got Ralph Fiennes as like, Voldemort, you've got Wormtail, but you've got David Tennant as, Barty Crouch Jr. And he's brilliant as a bad guy, considering that all we'd really seen him in is the Doctor, as Doctor Who, and now you've seen him as like loads of bad guys, in Dares and in Jessica Jones as well. He plays both of them extremely well. And I love the plot, as absurd as it seems. I mean, why would you put children, they are children into a competition with dragons and mermaids and, mazes with things that could kill you and people could get injured and die? And it's like, yeah, because that makes sense, Dumbledore, you keep going there. But, it's a good installment in the Harry Potter franchise, and it brings the magic, and it brings the camaraderie between the friends, and it strains it in normal ways as well, and you see, like, the Yule Ball as well, and you've got, like, Harry and Ron trying to ask a girl out. It's just so brilliant. And I love it because, you can imagine that that's how a lot of guys might feel trying to ask a girl out. It's just sort of being like, why do they always travel in packs? I don't know why we travel in packs. I don't even know. And I'm a woman. But honestly, it brings the story forward another chapter, and it brings it forward well. And it also means as well that this is the first film where we got our first real look at Voldemort. I mean, I know obviously we've seen him on the back of someone's head, and sort of like an idea, as it were, but we see him, we saw him as like a young kid, but we now see what he's going to be like for the rest of the franchise, and it's brilliantly done, and I absolutely love it. I love these films. I always have loved these films, and this film gets a 7 out of 10 for me. So the book. Now, the book is written so well, and honestly builds on an already brilliantly world that J.K. Rowling has been sort of like playing with and building up. It's still got everything that you'd want. It's still got the magic, it's still got subterfuge, it's got the rise of Voldemort properly now. I love as well the twist that Mad-Eye Moody wasn't Mad-Eye Moody. It was brilliant, because when I first read it, that honestly got me. I was like, oh damn, like he's not who he says he is. I love the little snapshots of the perfect life that you get with the Weasleys at the beginning before, everything. And it's so lovely. And I must admit, I do think that the Death of Cedric as well was so left field when I first read it that honestly, it broke me. I was like, oh my God, like I was really rooting for him. And then he dies. But it was, it was needed, and it changed the tone for the rest of the Harrys going forward. And it changed the tone for the Harry Potter franchise, because at this point now you've got Voldemort. He's killed a student. This is real. This is happening. Harry has got to deal with this. And I will always enjoy reading this book. I've read it several times over, and I know it is a bit of a tomb. So I do appreciate that, for some people it might be a one and done kind of thing. But I do think if you read it as a child and then read it as an adult, it's almost like reading a different story. You get different connotations and in certain points you're looking being like, really, you're going to act like that? But as a child, you're like, oh, I completely agree with them. And then as they get older, you turn around and go in, grow up. But the book, it gets an 8 out of 10 for me. So the plot. Now, both start with us at the Riddle house, and the caretaker sees a light in the house and goes to investigate. Now, it is a deformed Voldemort with Wormtail. He's kind of like a little baby creature thing. Nagini comes past and lets Voldemort know that the caretaker is there, so Voldemort kills the old man and continues on with his plan. But then Harry wakes up because he's seen it all. He just thinks it's a nightmare, but he's seen it all, and he's get this twinge in his scar whenever it's to do with Voldemort. So in the book, he's still at the Dursleys. In the film, in the book, he's still at the Dursleys at this point. In the film, he is at the Weasley's house now. So in the book, he gets a letter from Mrs. Weasley asking Harry to come join them for the Quidditch World Cup and the rest of the holidays, which the Dursleys agree to reluctantly, because Harry Potter turns around and goes, oh, you know that mass murderer that never got cleared? Yeah, he's my what's it called? Godfather. So do you want to mess with him? Because he can do magic outside of school. So anyway, the Weasleys come and pick Harry up. Now in the film, the Quidditch World Cup pretty much happens as soon as Harry awakes. He wakes up and they're off to the Quidditch World Cup. Now, in the book, you get a lot more time at the Weasleys and how at home Harry feels. And in fact, we also see Ron's other brothers, Bill and Charlie, because previously we've seen, of course, we've seen the twins, and of course we've seen Percy, and we've seen Ginny, but now we see Bill and Charlie as well. So anyway, in both the Weasleys, Harry and Hermione meet up with Cedric and his dad on the way to the World Cup, and they get a portkey to the Quidditch World Cup together. Now, in the book, you get a bit more about the build-up, and there's a lot more description around the Irish versus Bulgarian Quidditch team. You get sort of like a sense of a magical community, as it were, with this World Cup. But in the film, you get the kickoff pretty much, and then as soon as you get the kickoff, it then cuts to whoever wins. Now, in the book as well, we come across another house elf. Now, obviously, we've already met Dobby. But now we come across house elf Winky, who works for Barty Crouch Senior. Now, it's quite clear that she's not happy. She's up in the top box or whatever. Now, when both Ireland win, and there is celebrations, but they quickly turn to terror as the Death Eaters go through the campsite, destroying everything basically. So in both, everyone's sort of running around, trying to get away from the Death Eaters, trying to make their way home. And the Dark Mark, which is Lord Voldemort's symbol, which is obviously like, the snake of the skull, gets shot into the sky, and the Ministry Wizards come and almost take out Harry, Ron and Hermione because they just happen to be where the Dark Mark was set off. Now in the film, Harry sees the culprit. He sees Barty Crouch Jr. doing it. Obviously we don't find out he's Barty Crouch Jr. until way later. But he sees David Tennant doing the Dark Mark. But in the book, they only hear him sort of like off to the side. Now, the scene ends there in the film, but in the book, they come across Winky, who's obviously the house elf. She has a wand in her hand. It's Harry's wand. It's proved that was used to make the Dark Mark. And so therefore, Barty Crouch dismisses her completely with clothes, because obviously, as Dobby got a sock, Winky has now got clothes. So then the bit with Ron's ridiculous dress robes is quite early on in the book. It's before they even get to Hogwarts, whereas obviously in the film he's sort of like surrounded by his friends at the Gryffindor table, and then he gets given the dress robes and he's like, what is this? And it is ridiculous. You've seen it, I've seen it. It's ridiculous. Now, a big thing we do get in the book, but not in the film, is Hermione's activism towards house elf rights, and constantly trying to help them become free and get paid, and basically fair human rights, even though they're little house elves. And this is a big thing in the book, and it's a constant thing in the book. But in the film, we just never see that. In fact, we never even see Winky, and Dobby doesn't even show up in this film, which I think is a little bit of a letdown. But I can kind of understand why they did it. Now in both, though, we see Mad Eye come to the feast late, and then we get the announcement of the Triwizard Tournament being held at Hogwarts. However, only those aged 17 and above can compete, because we'd hate to kill someone under the age of 17, right? We are also very promptly introduced to the students from Beauxbatons and Durmstrang in the film, but in the book they're due to arrive later in the year, around October time, I think. So as usual in the book, you get more around lessons and everyday activities than you ever see in the films, but again, we can understand why. Once you've seen one lesson, you know, you kind of seen them all. But in both, we do get lesson from Mad-Eye Moody. Now, before the lesson from Mad-Eye Moody in the book, we get him turning Malfoy into a weasel. In the film, it's a little bit later that he turns Malfoy into a weasel, but at least he turns him into a weasel. Then he gets told off by by Professor McGonagall, because obviously you don't turn students into weasels. But then we get the lesson with Mad-Eye Moody, who teaches them all about the unforgivable curses, which is the Cruciatus curse, which is basically a torture curse. The Imperitus, I'm pretty sure I said that wrong, curse, which basically you can control the person that you've put that curse on. And obviously the Death curse. And the only person we know to ever have survived the Death curse is, of course, Harry Potter himself. So this visibly upsets Neville, this class. And we learn later it's because the Cruciatus curse was used on his parents, and they're now in St Mungo's hospital for sick witches and wizards. So we understand that that's why he's visibly upset. But he's then taken to one side by Mad-Eye Moody to kind of help him through this. Now in the book as well, as I said, we get more insights into their lessons, into the homework and their day-to-day lives again. And in the book, we also get the arrival of the other schools and the Goblet of Fire to apply through. Now, as I said, in the film, it's almost instantaneous. You know, the Goblet of Fire, you know, the Triwizard Tournament is announced, the Goblet of Fire is brought forward, the Durmstrongs and Beauxbatons have arrived. But in the book, it's sort of like a lot later on in the year. However, they do arrive in pretty much the same way. Now, Beauxbatons do arrive in a giant carriage pulled by huge winged horses. A slight difference as well is they have both male and female students, whereas in the film I think they just went with just female students. Durmstrang, however, also arrive in the same way in a ship, and they are all male students. Now in the book as well, you have Ludo Bagman and Barty Crouch to watch over the Triwizard Tournament. In the film it's only Barty Crouch. In fact, in the book it's Barty Crouch for like the beginning, and then it ends up being Percy Weasley because Barty Crouch has kind of mysteriously vanished. In the film, it is Barty Crouch right up until the point where he gets killed. So in the book now, you know, everybody's sort of applying, whereas obviously in the film they've already applied. Now in both, however, Fred and George try to age themselves because they're so close to being 17, and who wouldn't want to throw themselves forward for death and glory? However, it backfires and they end up growing long white beards, just like Merlin. Now the three normal champions are picked. Obviously it's Victor Crumb for Durmstrang, Fleur Delacroix from Beauxbatons, and Cedric Diggory from, you know, Harry Potter, from Hogwarts. However, Harry's name pops out as well. And obviously we get them. I've seen so many like memes and everything about this, where obviously, you know, in the book it's asked very calmly from Dumbledore if Harry puts his name in the Goblet of Fire. In the film, however, he screams at him and shouts at him. But yeah, so everyone in Gryffindor is happy for Harry because, you know, they're going to have a Gryffindor champion. However, Ron is jealous and ends up falling out with Harry for quite a bit. Now, Hermione does stay friendly with him in both through this time. And in both we get the interviews between Rita Skeeter and Harry, where she twists everything that he says. But of course, journalist, right? Rita Skeeter's a horrible human being. Now in the book, Rita Skeeter actually plays a bigger part throughout the book. And several times she does sort of like break stories that they're trying to figure out how she does it. And then it realises that she's an illegal animagus. Now an animagus is someone that can turn themselves into an animal. Now we know that Sirius can turn himself into a dog. We know that Harry's dad, James, used to turn himself into a stag. And we know that Wormtail turned himself into a rat. And I believe that Rita Skeeter is a little bug. In the film, we briefly see her twice, and then that's it. So, in the book, we get a wand weighing ceremony before anything kicks off. And this is where all the wands are tested to see everything's going right. And in the book, Hagrid tells Harry directly to meet him at his cabin because he's going to show him the first task, which is dragons. In the film, however, Ron uses Hermione as a long-winded way to tell Harry because Ron knows that the dragons are coming in and wants to warn Harry. In both, however, Harry does chat to Sirius in the fire about everything that's happening so far. Ron walks in but doesn't kind of see him. So you get sort of like Harry finding out about the dragons, and then he's aware that everybody else is going to find out the dragons. So he goes off and tells Cedric that the first task is dragons, which is really sweet. And then Mad Eye gives Harry the idea of using the summoning spell to bring his broom to him to defeat the dragon because he is a fair flyer. He's a good flyer. So task 1, the dragon starts the same way with Harry summoning his broom. His broom arrives. However, in the film, he ends up being chased by the Horntail all around the school grounds and ends up accidentally killing it. In the book, he manages to get the egg rather nicely, rather quickly, and it's over. Now, in both, however, Ron now believes that Harry is in fact telling the truth, that he didn't put his name in the Goblet of Fire, because why would anyone realistically want to do that? Yeah, because it takes him almost dying to realise. So then, they're now back to being mates. Now, when opening up the egg is the second clue, all you get is wailing. And so Harry kind of puts it to one side and forgets about it. Now, as I mentioned before, we don't see any of the house elf rites that Hermione embarks on. But in the book, we do. And we even see Dobby and Winky working at Hogwarts as free elves. Dobby happily, Winky has turned into a kind of alcoholic little house elf that lives by the fire and is a disgrace. So then we get the Yule Ball coming up, where the guys have to ask a girl out on a date. Yeah, that don't go well. Now in the film we have a dancing class with Professor McGonagall before the finding of the dates. This is not in the book, but honestly it's one of the best scenes in the film, and I love it. I love that dance, her teaching everyone how to dance. Now in the run up to the Yule Ball in the film and in the book, Harry is struggling to get a date. Actually, no, in the film he's struggling to get a date. In the book, girls keep asking him, but it's, they're only asking him because he's a Triwizard champion, as it were. Well, not champion yet, but can be. But in both, Harry does ask out Cho Chang, and it turns out she turns him down because she's already going with Cedric Diggory. Now, Ron then tries to ask Fleur de la Cour out, and is traumatised because he kind of shouts at her and screams at her and then runs away. So then Harry at this point realises that they're kind of desperate and kind of need dates, so he then goes and asks out the Parvati twins. Now, before Harry asks out the Parvati twins, Ron has kind of turned around to Hermione and gone, "You're a girl, you've not got anyone to go with, do you want to go with me?" So this pisses off Hermione, as it would piss off any girl if you assume that because she's a girl and because she's Hermione, she hasn't got a date, she already has a date. Will turn out she's going with Victor Crumb, and she is, beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. So now we get to the ball. Now, in the book, she is wearing robes of periwinkle blue. In the film, they turn them pink. Now, I would love to see a periwinkle blue dress. All I can imagine is just like she would just look so magical. The champions do the first dance, however, and then Harry and Ron kind of sit down to one side, neglecting their dates. Hermione joins them at one point, and Ron kicks off about Victor being the enemy. This upsets Hermione. She sort of goes running off. Harry is caught in the middle again. And that kind of, ends there. Now, in both, you see the blossoming romance of Madame Maxime, who's the Beauxbatons headmistress, and Hagrid. And we learn that Hagrid is half giant. I mean, what else would he be, to be fair, to be that big? Now, in the book, after the ball ends, Cedric tells Harry how to decipher the second clue. In the film, however, it's a bit later, and he kind of just tells Harry to go take a bath. He says that in both. I mean, you could be a little bit more, nice about it, but it's like, go take a bath, and then it'll all work itself out. But in both, however, after the ball, Hermione has it out with Ron again, and ends up crying because again he's being completely insensitive. And then she kind of snaps at Harry, and Harry's like, "Oh, what did I do?" Now in the book we get Rita sticking around and even revealing Hagrid to be a half giant to the world. Now in the magical world, giants are considered to be brutes and horrible human beings. Well, they're not human, but horrible people. So then everyone's kind of calling for him to be fired, and it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. Anyways, at this point, Harry then finally goes to take a bath with his egg and deciphers the second clue and realises about mermaids in the Great Lake. Now, while doing this, Myrtle puts in an appearance. We remember Moaning Myrtle from the second book and film, and helps a little with him. So Harry actually ends up with help from Neville in the film, as he needs to be able to breathe underwater for an hour. But in the book, it's Dobby that helps him get the gillyweed. Now, in both, Harry goes down and stays until Hermione and Cho are saved, but then he rescues not only Ron, but also Fleur's sister as well, which gives him extra points in the tournament. Now, in both, we get muttering and secrets between Karkaroff and Snape, and we also get Snape accusing Harry of stealing ingredients for another Polyjuice potion. Now, in the book as well, we do get more of Sirius in the fact that he's hiding out in Hogsmeade to be able to see Harry and discuss everything that's going on. And it would have been nice to see a bit more of Sirius in the film as well, but obviously it weren't to be. So, Barty Crouch Sr. is killed in the film after the second task. Then Harry finds out that Barty Crouch Jr. Is actually a Death Eater, and that's who he's seen with Voldemort. However, Barty Crouch Jr., we find out about from Sirius, but in the book, he is believed to be dead. Now, in the book, we get Barty Crouch Sr. come out upon the trees, looking estranged and disravelled, upon Harry and Crumb, and then he disappears again. And so now we get the bit of the book, in the book, where we get a bit with the Pensieve, and Harry is going into Dumbledore's memories, but this has already happened in the film. But it's also because of a very vivid second dream that Harry ends up in Dumbledore's office in the first place. And this is where Harry finds out about Barty Crouch Jr., Barty Crouch Sr., the Death Eaters and everything like that. And he also finds out about Neville's parents being tortured to madness in the book. We do not find this out in the film. In the book, we get more of a run-up to the third task, and Ron and Hermione help him practice curses. And now the final task is upon us. So in the maze, it's a bit different. There are different obstacles. However, it ends with both Harry and Cedric taking the Triwizard Cup, and it actually being a portkey that takes them to the Riddle graveyard. Cedric is then killed outright. Wormtail resurrects Voldemort by also using Harry's blood. Voldemort calls his Death Eaters to his side and expresses disdain that they may not be as loyal as he thinks, because if you're not in prison for being a Death Eater, then you've clearly told some lies to stay out of it. So anyway, so Voldemort and Harry duel, and at the time that they're both firing a spell, their wands connect. This then brings back sort of like the ghosts of his dead parents, of Cedric, of a witch as well, which isn't really mentioned in the film but mentioned in the book, and the caretaker. So all these people that he's just, that they're sort of like hanging about in his wand, as it were, then say that they're going to go around Voldemort and Harry should make a break for it. And Cedric says, oh, can you take the body back for me, for my parents? So then they break the connection. The Wraiths stop Voldemort for a small moment. Harry escapes with Cedric's body by using the Triwizard Cup again, and then he gets back. Obviously, they then realise that Cedric is dead. Harry then gets taken off to one side by Mad-Eye Moody. However, Mad-Eye is really Barty Crouch Jr. So before he can kill Harry, Dumbledore, Snape and McGonagall burst in. And due to Truth Serum, Barty Crouch Jr. reveals everything. Now, it's never actually said in the film what happens to Barty Crouch Jr. However, in the book, it is he gets given the Dementor's Kiss, which kills him completely. So he's gone. He's not coming back. But then after that, Harry recounts everything to Dumbledore in his office in the film. In the book, however, it's Sirius and Dumbledore. And then when the hospital wing... And then again in the hospital wing with Cornelius Fudge, and he has an argument with Dumbledore saying that it's all lies and Voldemort is not back. So Sirius reveals himself to Snape and Mrs. Weasley, and Dumbledore puts actions into place immediately so that many wizards will be aware that Voldemort is back. And this is all in the book. None of this kind of happens in the film. But in both, we do get the final speech around how Cedric was killed and why. And the film ends with Durmstrang and the Beauxbatons leaving and everyone realising that they have to stick together. The book ends with Harry giving his winnings to Fred and George and the final train ride back to London, where we also find out that Rita Skeeter was transforming into a beetle all year long. So the plot did stay close-ish. It did miss out on a lot of the perfect days and a few of the subplots like Rita, the half giant story, Sirius as well. It does also leave out anything to do with the Dursleys from like the beginning as well. And it, I mean, I can understand why it kind of left out a lot of the information that it did, but as plots go, it gets a 5 out of 10 from me. Now, obviously, this is my own opinion. If you do agree or disagree with anything that I've said, please do leave it below in the comments. But thank you so much for watching, and remember to always keep it contento.